Here this afternoon. My name is Mr. Kievit. Most importantly, my job is being a father to two energetic young South Africans. That is primarily who I am, what I do to pay for my bond for a home which I will only own in 20 years' time, is presenting a show on Cape Talk Radio where I try to get Cape Townians and South Africans, and ever increasingly through the internet, people around the world to talk. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us this afternoon. We've had to enlarge the venue, which has led us to some technical issues. I am fortunately trained to throw my voice. I was a tenor in junior choir in high school, so I know how to use my diaphragm. I do not know how well Sandi Sijake and Professor Jonathan Jansen, how well they sing, but I also know they also know how to throw their voices themselves. So we will have a microphone here. If we can arrange another microphone throughout the course of this conversation, it would be greatly appreciated. But because of the interest of this conversation, we've decided to increase the venue. I hope you enjoy it, and let's get started in the conversation. So now that I've introduced myself, let me introduce the wonderful and inspirational speakers that I have here with us this afternoon. First, of course, I have Sandi Sijake, the author of Fighting for My Country, the testimony of a freedom fighter. He spent years in exile and years incarcerated on Robben Island. Has also spent time within the ANC, but also from within the ANC, a critic of the ANC, and also someone who deserves very little introduction because he's from my neighborhood. So I've known of Professor Jonathan Jansen for some time now, but he is known as his day job as the extraordinary professor of education at Stellenbosch University. That's his day job. In the morning, he spends his time at Cressway High School, where in 2023, Cressway High School received one of the lowest matric pass rates in the Western Cape. And what Jonathan Jansen has been doing before he starts his day job is to go and teach and help and mentor at Cressway High School, then goes to his day job. And that has shown fruits over the last year, when since 2023, Jonathan, if you could maybe give me the correct, a pass rate of?
39 to 66.
39% to 66% pass rate. I enjoy doing book festivals and book discussions, but I don't want to make it seem and to talk to our authors as if I'm delivering a book report. It just makes me seem a little bit clever by saying, on chapter 2, page 79, you said this, and it makes them feel very good, but it tells you very little about what happens in the minds and the thoughts and the soul of our writers. But we're talking today about where to for South Africa. What are we fighting for in South Africa? Why is it in a country, we just last week, I'm sure some of you may have seen on social media, a mother in Wellington found it important to take a Sharpie, a Cokie pen, and draw gangster symbols on a 3-year-old baby's shoulders, a 2 and an 8 on his chest. My son is 3 years old, he's a baby. That child is lost. Why is it in a country that children under the age of 6 years old, 46% of children under the age of 6 years old grow up in a household that earn less than 1,400 Rand a month. And why is it that in a country where in 2012 we had 37 miners shot down in Marikana, we had a state that led miners to starve in Stilfontein, plenty to diagnose in this country? We're unable to solve the country's problems in the next 45 minutes to 60 minutes, but at least we can start a conversation here. So, round of applause to Sandi Sijake and Jansen. I do have a couple of notes in which I'd like to refer to, but from what I would note from both these two books, Breaking Bread by Jonathan Jansen and Fighting for My Country by Sandi Sijake, is that these are memoirs, that these are memories that these two gentlemen recall. And what is a memoir? It's your own story. I do know that from speaking to Jonathan Jansen, you were concerned that one day you may forget these memories. What I quite viscerally recall from Sandi Sijake's book is your almost detailed photographic memory of decades ago. So let me start with you, Sandi. When writing a memoir, in writing this particular story, I find it fascinating that you can remember the details, the names of comrades that you met in safe houses, in Swaziland, darkened corners, and still today are able to tell that story. Why was this telling of your story so important to you?
Thank you very much and greetings to everybody. And for purpose of actually ensuring that, hoping everybody hears me, but I have this gadget. We always believe in a plan B. If my plan A, this one, doesn't function, I will turn to this one, don't worry. Now, coming to the question you raised, I think actually my communities in the 40s and 50s did us very great honor. When we attended school, first and foremost, there were slates and a pen and a pencil. No book, no paper. Every new, actually, when one teacher goes out, when the Professor goes out and to come in, we wipe out everything that was there in the slate, we write again. That continues throughout the year. Towards the end of the year, I must know what I studied from the very first time I came into the class of every subject, 5, 6 subjects. I must know them all, otherwise I can't pass. So that was a very, very critical thing just to come in. When then I went for military training from 1963, it was a very interesting thing that of keeping everything in your memory. If I come into a house, because if I come into a house, I don't know whether you are a true member of the ANC or you are a part of the system. I must record everything I see in your house. If I come next time and I must note what is missing in this house, which was there first. Although I won't ask you why and so forth. If I'm in the forest, I walk a certain path. I must recognize every tree. If there's a tree that is not there when I come next day, it might have been taken by the enemy to make it clear so that they can fire or do whatever. Then I must know that the tree that was there is no longer there. Then I can go on and on. But in short, I thank very much our system that time. There were no radios, there was nothing, but you had to carry everything in your memory. In detail is not half the thing. You can't say you forgot. If you forget, they remind you that you and tell you then so that you don't forget again. It was a wonderful thing in this way. We grew up under that system. And what you are telling also, it has been very helpful now when there's a repatriation. Because there were comrades I met like Basil February, which we called him Paul Peterson. When the reburial, it was wonderful because we are here to tell that, this comrade, when we came and also at the camp there, when we come, he used to have a very wonderful song saying, comrade fighting all together, with love, Bella failing never, We fight not for glory or distinction. And the voice of our people is calling. The weak and poor are rising. The foe is mighty but retreating. And the sound of our marching feet. That was the section.
I take it back, a fellow choir member here. Jonathan, the genesis of Breaking Bread is that wonderful editor, Jonathan Jill Moody, says you have to start putting things on. Look, you're a prolific writer in your own right. You've written previous books, personal books, Song for Sorrows, your most personal book about your mother. You've been a columnist for the Sunday Times for the last 15 years. I wonder how many columns those are, how many words you've written down. But your genesis, your impetus to start jotting down, which you say you have said you had fear that you may start forgetting.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming. I don't associate the Cape Flats with book festivals. This is, I know. So this is absolutely wonderful, and thank you all for coming, including my former dean, Professor Govenden over there. Betty is an amazing person, etc. Anyway, so yeah, you know, as you grow older, you fear not being able to leave on the record the arc of your life. And so I wanted my two beautiful daughters who are about to land in Cape Town from New Zealand via Pretoria. I want them, they're 3 and 6 right now, but I want them one day to say, oh my God, the Jansens were really screwed up, you know, which they were, you know. And this is where I come from, the good and the bad, you know, and this is why, as middle-class kids today, compared to when we grew up, that they take nothing for granted. So there's that part, but it's also driven, the memoir, by the need to, because I have students all the time. This week at high school, the afternoon at university. Tell us how you became successful. No, I don't think I'm successful. I think I just, you know, move around. But in their mind, how do you get from a retreat to being a professor, etc.? So I thought, let me tell them how that happens. You know what I mean? Conscious all the while, of course, that everybody's journey is going to be slightly different. So that is there. And also, I didn't want to forget. When I finished the first draft of the manuscript, which took about 3 months, I know Jill Moody, my editor, was very surprised. He said, "Man, we gave you till the end of the year. Why are you giving this thing?" Well, because I've got 3 other books that I'm writing. That's why this one must get out, you know. But as you reflect on your life, you reflect on the people that made it possible for you to get there. Writing a memoir is supposed to humble you. It's supposed to make you conscious that nothing you have achieved is because of you. It's because of Uncle Jarpi's son, who gave me 20 rand to re-register at UWC because I failed my first year. If they didn't give that, we wouldn't be here together. You know what I'm saying? So it's a way also of looking back in order to say thank you to the many people who make us possible.
I'm going to branch off from what you're saying about a road to success, and I think a road to success starts with an inciting incident. The moment one was conscientized. I remember a 1994 election campaign, and my parents took me to Perryvale Primary School, where for the first time I saw Nelson Mandela and John Pretoria singing Sikonjalo Kenako. But my inciting instance of wanting to be a journalist was the invasion of Iraq after 9/11, but also, and I forget the father and son's name, it was seeing the image of a young boy cower behind his father while being shot by snipers in the West Bank. And it's a famous image for it was forgetting of their names is injustice, but for me as a young person, was my inciting to the event, which I then wanted to tell the truth and be a journalist. Let's talk about inciting events. St. John's College, Bantu administrations that What conscientizes Sandi?
Thank you. The times actually I grew under were very challenging for the whole community. Long before going to St. John's College, our communities were actually under stress and strain from the rules and the way we were governed. So at that early age, we had to participate in what our parents were doing. That was because they were saying they were fighting on our behalf so that we can grow in a normal environment than under which they were growing. The issues of actually stock culling, which was there, which was very important for them because to send us to school, they had to pay money in the form of cash. And for that, they had to sell part of their livestock. Apart from that, the stock was important just to sustain his families up. But they had to. Now, when these things came, those were direct attack to their way of living and also to impacting our future, that we won't have a future. And then if we were to sit down, so they had to drag us on because this was a fight for everybody. In order for us to continue the fight, we had to learn from them in practice, and therefore, as we grow up, they even tell us even more. And at our schools, it was the other critical people, apart from our actually parents. It were the teachers and the priests. The teachers were important because they came with stories they heard from their colleagues, and they were able to translate what the government had written about the future of our life, or the intended future of our life. So that became an important message, packaged in our own language, translated from whether English or Afrikaans. That this, if you actually tolerate it, that's where you are going in the future. So that was an important thing. By the time I get to the St. John's College, we had actually been involved in this fight, and of course, it was at the height of the enforcement of the Bantu Education Act, which was also, we had to challenge at school. So not to allow it to happen, because we demanded a universal form of education for all South Africans. Not that we should be packaged, that your knowledge must be limited here, and yours must be one brick above the other, and the others can be, the sky is the limit. So those are the aspects which we did. But the critical aspect also was that our teachers, it was very, very interesting, white and black, in their subjects. They taught us actually something which was important for our political growth. Because you take, for instance, they bring in the issue of, let's say, in British history, when they were fighting with the Russians, the charge of the Light Brigade, where the Russians actually took the guns from the British unit. And then some of them say, no, we can't allow those people to take our guns away. Let us charge. And then in short, the issue of the charge of the Light Brigade was based on that, charging the British, charging the Russians. So that was the issue. Then there was also very close at home the wars here of our people fighting with an intention of that we must have an integrated community. Some people, they say those were the wars of resistance, but our people, what was critical in our people, even from here, was that we must have an integrated community with one human culture. In South Africa, not Christian personal culture. So that was what we were fighting. Then, when during the 100 Years War with the British in the Eastern Cape, there was a very interesting poem there which was describing what happened when the two forces met. Of course, the British had the upper hand, and it was that they never allow our people to bury or even to collect their dead, such that they were eaten by the wolves, the worms, and then Dr. became. So that thing was very difficult with us. Then, of course, after that is what happened one day in St. John's College. That this is your history, and this is what happened. And in order for you to be a better person tomorrow, you must ensure that you get out of it. And it was very clear also, we were not even confused much who our colonizer was. It was very clear. You see, that, for instance, the concept of that we were colonized by the Afrikaners was never the case with us. The Afrikaners and ourselves were having concentration camps in the Free State and the other parts of the country. Then you can't say those are the people who defeated you when you were at the concentration camps with them, but they were made the managers of the country by the colonized. So the St. John's College was very, very critical that we had to take, they had to tell us to take other means and measures to ensure that we become a better people and we have a better country and a better life.
Jonathan, for you in your book, I read into many events that may have even happened before you were born that make you the Jonathan Jansen that we know today. You write about the classism of a mother's family from Montague and a father's family from Cape Town, the complexity of growing up in a fundamentalist evangelical church movement, the disappearance of your father, how even your father would literally give a shirt off his back to help someone, or whether it be, if we're talking about teachers, a Latin teacher in high school, which you write, and surprisingly, if you find out in the book, Professor Jonathan Jansen was in fact a pretty average student until it comes to a Latin teacher who says, I see you. What's that moment for you, Professor?
Yeah, I didn't think very highly of myself, obviously. I also didn't think that I was going to do anything with my academic. I mean, you don't think like that when the horizons around you say you're going to work, either in a factory like your uncle or drive a van like your dad and so on. So it's hard to believe today, but in those days, I didn't have expectations. And this Latin teacher in what I suppose today is grade 10 or something, stops me while we were playing soccer. That's all I went to school for, to play in the 2 breaks and after school, play soccer, And he comes to me and he says, Johnny, come in. And I was very irritated because I want to score goals, And he says to me, I figured you out. You pretend you know nothing. But actually you're very smart. You have potential. Now, this is before Google. I couldn't take out and see potential, chat GPT. There was no such thing. So when my mother, who was an orthopedic nurse, came home the night from Princess Alice Hospital, I said, Mommy, my Latin teacher said I have potential. What does the word mean? And my mother says, it means, my boy, you don't have to play soccer for the rest of your life. You could do other things. But I do remember not sleeping that night. I do remember saying, an adult, for the first time, actually told me what I could do, not what I couldn't do. And I was so determined to prove him right. And today, and that changed everything, just about everything, because I don't think I ever again came second in class to anyone, whether it was in South Africa or in 2 universities in the United States. I don't think I ever came second, except, of course, in 76 when we boycotted classes because of Soweto, and so I didn't pass that year. But the point about this today, as I said here at this very school a few days ago, never underestimate the power of a single teacher in influencing the life trajectory of children who don't often hear from adults at home, in Elsies River, in Langa, in Retreat, where I now work. We don't often hear somebody telling them what they can do.
I need to and this is why younger people listen to podcasts, because you can talk for 3 hours. We have to to move on, because I want to talk about this concept that is written about. I once attended a lecture by historian Nomalanga Mkhize, and she spoke about the deep similarities between a Jan Smuts and a Nelson Mandela. You see them in isolation; they're products of their time. Jan Smuts more so, but she says that both those presidents were presidents who had to preside over transitions. And what Nomalanga Mkhize says is that Smuts, in his time, in his context, did it better in which Nelson Mandela did. He presided over a transition from an apartheid to a democratic. And she posits that that is probably the start of where we see the fault lines 30 years down the line in a democratic dispensation. Do you want to elaborate on that if we just move forward on trying to determine and diagnose where we are today, John?
Well, first of all, I disagree with Nomalanga. I've actually just read the book. I just bought the book by a colleague comparing Smuts and Mandela. Mandela was handed a poison chalice. Mandela was told to reconcile the interests of Afrikaners in Maine, of white people, and the aspirations of black people when we were on the verge of all-out war. People forget, especially young people, students, when they protest, they forget, because they weren't there, how closely we came to an all-out war, right? Smuts didn't have that problem. Smuts' transition is from the British
To English.
to exactly
English to an Afrikaner.
from the eventually from the English to Afrikaner, but this is 1910. This is post the two Anglo-Boer wars, as they used to be called, etc. That was easy when you had the jackboot on the neck of the majority of black people. No. That comparison, Nomalanga is seriously smart, but on this one she's wrong.
Let's talk about then training before 1994. We spoke about teachers and sensing possibility. You received your training in Egypt and then in Russia. Your plan was then to infiltrate back into South Africa. We're looking at a plan for South Africa when freedom comes. What was your plan when receiving training in the underground, in Egypt, in Russia, various campaigns, including the Wankie campaign, through Zimbabwe? Eventually you return to South Africa through Swaziland and Swatini before you are arrested. But what was the plan when in training?
Thank you. I think everybody is aware now that by the time when we embarked on the armed struggle, we were the only fortunate liberation movement in Africa as a whole, because we had the Freedom Charter, which is spelled out in details what South Africa will look like if our liberation movement succeeds. I'm actually mentioning this because in our interaction with other liberation movements, whether it was from Namibia, from Zimbabwe, from Angola, from Mozambique, up to KIGC in West Africa, they wanted freedom, but there was no content, actually tangible content like ourselves. We were the only liberation movement. So going out to actually the training in Egypt, as you say, but before I go, I must also indicate that in fact our very first training in late December to early January 1961 to 1962 was here at Mamre. And that's where people like President February, like James April, the Stones from Old Tree here, and others from different parts of the Western Cape, we were gathered. And the main person actually was Lux Martin, assisted by Dennis Goldberg and Alpi Sachs. And of course, we were very much myself also was very fed up with Albisex. It's just a side thing. Because when we do exercise, he was very fit. He used to outrun all of us. That was a very terrible thing. We demand this white man. But that was, I mean, but that was part of that way. That was the training. The aim, of course, was still to first embark on an armed struggle. And we were taken actually notes also from Dennis Goldberg used to read us Che Guevara's guerrilla warfare book. And Albi Sachs teaching us about mechanics and making Molotov cocktails and all those aspects, So when we left the country, then it was to further that, to be more professional, is to establish probably a fighting guerrilla movement in South Africa.
You mentioned the lectures by Jack Simon. Professor Jansen mentioning a teacher figure. You also consider Jack Simons as some sort of teaching mentor for you as well.
No, that's true. That was the issue. Because it's something that in the 50s, still very young. The very first thing white person I went to his house through the front door was Jack Simons and Ray. And very interestingly, this white person, they made just tea for us. Quite a group and all that. It was a very, very different experience for me. And but coming also, just concluding the very first question you raised also, is that I think our training in Russia, also for the Soviet Union then, helped us a lot because we were also on the issue of talking about the non-racial society in South Africa. But we were still, as you might remember, many elderly people here, that we were still actually divided into streams. There was the Colored People's Congress, Indian Congress, the Congress of Democrats, apart from the ANC, which by itself we understood that these other congresses, in fact, they were not South Africans because we were the only South Africans who were fighting. They were just helping us. They were sister organizations. We were not equal, So by our training out there, that helped us, as we'll say, to understand that we're all of us South Africans, and we have to end this thing of sister organization. We don't have a sister organization. We must belong to one organization, which happened in 1969 at Morogoro. But that by itself, I mean, the interaction with people like Jack Simons was very much also very important for us all to grow in our understanding. And that was even when we were back at Congo preparing to go to Rhodesia then under 1967, which started in August 1967 up to May 1968, our operations in the region. We were very much focused on the issue of having one grouping in South Africa, and also that we have to come back to South Africa even by 40, the whole distance of maybe 2,000 kilometers in order to establish our operations, political and military operations in South Africa.
Jonathan, you write that there's not many things that make you angry, aggressively angry, but being called colored is one of them. We're at the Cape Flats, and Cape Flats is geographical. Cape Flats, famous, but it's come to denote places where poor colored people are. Connected to what Sandi has said now. Yeah, because that's what I get from when I reread your book. There's one thing that you get really, really angry about is the notion of coloredness. What's your thoughts on these proudly colored movements?
No, if you call me colored and I'm a pacifist, you're playing with your life. And I come from the school of Neville Alexander that refuse to accept the pigeonholes into which apartheid put us. I mean, you very beautifully illustrate that the ANC is partly to blame for this. I remember I was so excited, I happened to be in the country as a student overseas, and I was so excited the day Nelson Mandela was released. So I went to the church service, Alan Busak, and then to the Grand Parade in Cape Town. And when Mandela speaks, because remember, he's been in prison. He referred to Indians, coloureds, Africans. I said, oh my God, there we go again. No, I mean, this is nonsense and convincing people. I mean, what's the consequences of these categories? The consequences, since I'm in Mitchell's Plain, is a black African woman, for the sake of the context, on a plane on Boxing Day from Durban to Cape Town and talks about people in Mitchell's Plain in the most derogatory terms. That's a consequence of insisting that we're different, when so much of what we share is the same. Apartheid's reason for existing is to tell us that we're different, right? And as my friend Herman Giliomi, by far the preeminent historian of Afrikaner nationalism, said in his book when he wrote about the so-called colored area in Stellenbosch, he says the reason they had to separate colored people and Afrikaners is not because they were different, but because they were so much the same. And the sooner we realize that, in my home, if you came in as a bean counter, when my children are here from different parts, and you try to put all of them in a box, they will laugh at you, because we raised them with the notion that that the human beings, first. And whatever somebody puts, remember, you weren't born Catholic, you weren't born Zulu. Somebody had to tell you, right, that you are this category. So no, don't think. There's two things that upset me when the Blue Bulls lose.
That time being spent in Pretoria that did not do you too well. You're a Bull supporter, that time spent in Pretoria. As a global supporter.
See me outside.
I really want to get to the diagnosis of South Africa and how do we fix. I'll stay with you, Jonathan. You have a tough skin. You do not mind, particularly after 15 years of writing columns with direct comments, social media, and I'm sure people have said to your face that is your approach not too hard? You're the type of educator, firstly, of straighten your tie, pull your pants up. Is that how you see us, and what you've done at Crestway over the last year is changing how we see ourselves, conduct ourselves? One of the answers to starting with ourselves and then later with our country?
Yeah, unfortunately, when you're a columnist, the only way you're going to stay a columnist for 50 years is if you live on the edge. If you tell people what they already believe, you'll be out of a job quickly. So the whole idea is to counter people's sense of themselves. That's what a columnist does. I hope one day I can write like Justice Malala, who does that with the finesse that is really quite extraordinary. If you only know me through my columns, you'll have one view of me. But you wouldn't have seen me this week in the home of a Muslim family in Lavender Hill, breaking bread with them, when every instinct with which I was raised as an evangelical fundamentalist parent tells me these are the enemy. I'm embarrassed to say that, but that's what I was taught, right? You wouldn't have seen me cry with a student who at the age of 14 showed up pregnant this week. You wouldn't have seen the many other ways in which one lives your life if you only see me through the columns. And so a lot of people, I've been called the son of many things, and that's only because of people who don't know you. Tomorrow morning I'm speaking at an Anglican church. Betty will be very proud of me, in 2 services about education and faith. So there's many sides to one speak.
What do people in the ANC call you? Because even as a veteran of the movement, a veteran in the ANC, you have come up against incredibly powerful people for calling out what has been wrong within the ANC as a party and the ANC in government. Do you care what other politicians and SGs and former SGs and former presidents say about you?
Thank you. I think that is a very great thing, in fact, to stand for the people in the country, because I still believe that what I was fighting for has not been attained and was still very far from it, and I can't see myself going this way or that. And irrespective of whoever has an opinion, you say, against that. That is what I believe. But in the ANC, they terminated my membership in 2015. Just myself, I'm not elected to the ANC since 2015 because they couldn't tolerate me.
Yeah. Don't want to make this conversation about Jan Smuts, but he has there's a saying that's attributed to him that says, in South Africa, the worst never happens. In South Africa, the best never happens. And there is succinctly in one of your columns, I've said, these are the 10 reasons why South Africa will not go down a path of failure. What are they?
So I've worked in all the 9 provinces with every slice of humanity, however you want to describe us as South Africans. And this I can tell you with some authority. There are many more good people in this country than there are thugs. And that is the reason for my faith. Do you know what just happened this first term? I want you to imagine you're a young, white, Afrikaans-speaking kid from fairly wealthy parents in Stellenbosch. This boy, Cornelius Haasbroek, sat in my PGCE class. This is the teacher certificate class after your first degree. And he sat in my class. I taught them education policy from January last year to June. And Neil says to me, Professor, you don't have to pay me a cent. Can I come and teach at Cressway? There's no other white teachers at Cressway. I'm sure his parents said, don't go via Overcomp. Because he asked me what's safe. And he dedicated his time, his life, from 6:30 every morning to late in the afternoon to teach our children. That's what I look at. I don't look at the gangsters. I don't look at them because you get a skewed image. You look at our politicians. Tell me one of them that's not corrupt. Just one, including your president and his coach. So the matras, yeah. So it depends on how you see the country. If you only see these corrupt buggers, and you don't see an Imtiaz Suleiman, and you don't see the many people here in Mitchell's Plain who use their pension money to pay the school fees, you get a skewed view of South Africa.
Sandi, I've been treated like I'm on commercial radio and a producer shouting, wrap up now. But I want you to have the last word. Why do you have belief in this country? Why will South Africa not fail?
Thank you. I believe to the people, what you actually made me join the struggle was because of the people. And I believe they have shown me over the years that they can resist and they have all the resilience. And that they took it from our ancestors. Because even if you look here, our ancestors have actually fought to have an integrated South African community. That's why the colonies have had all these boundaries which started from the Black River there next to Cape Town and up to the Eastern Cape, always these boundaries. And also, finally, even when you take the people, they try to make very important the Zulu. The Zulu-speaking South Africans, they were very humiliated because when King Dinuzulu was actually arrested and before he was sent to St. Helena Island, the British, they put all the students into a pool and they made him wade from this direction and from that. When he came to swallow part of it, they were busy laughing. And those are the humiliations which our people have shown they can never tolerate forever. And they will always stand up against that. And they are still seeking to stand up against that. And even younger people, they are very, very much in search of the best and honorable way, with the idealistic way forward, where they can put their shoulders to ensure that the country is out of the quagmire.
Ladies and gentlemen, our producers at the back are waving their hands, but Jonathan and Sandi will be around. Signed copies of fighting for my country will be available. Ask yourself, what do you remember? What is your inciting moment? And why do you believe this country will not fail? Thank you so much.